commitments that we've made to the Lord. And the word adultery actually means idolatry and unfaithful. And we can also be unfaithful to the Lord. And so we were going through that. And when we got to the end there and the consequences, and so the topic of not committing adultery continues on tonight as far as the topic of Roman numeral that he was talking about. But he goes into the lesson, and so we'll start in chapter number 7, and we'll kind of begin to go through and look at things verse by verse here. This lesson, lesson number 15, goes from Proverbs chapter 7, verse number 1, all the way down to verse number 23. And as he covers this subject here, and so we'll start in verse number 1. He says, "My son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee." Now again, this seems to be very repetitive with Solomon. Continually reminding his son, reminding his children what their responsibility is. Here he's a little bit more direct, a little bit more, I guess you could say probably aggressive. He says, "My son, keep my words." And again, I can almost, when I read that, I can almost hear, because growing up as a kid, my dad was very good at tone of voice. And I could almost hear Solomon's tone of voice here saying, "My son, keep my commandments." And as you look at that, and the punctuation and that little comma there, and in between "my son" and "lay up my commandments," there's kind of a break in there. So you can really sense the attitude of Solomon, and he's being more direct. He's being more authoritative here as a father, and he says, "My son, keep my commandments." And then he goes on and says, "Lay up my commandments with thee." And he goes on a little bit further, or he said, "Keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee." And so he kind of begins to, as we look at the second part of that, he says, "And lay up my commandments with thee." It makes reference to his words and his commandments being something close. Something that's beside you, something that you carry with you, something that you keep in mind. And as we go on, you'll see this in verse number 2. Again, he says, "Keep my commandments." And as we look at this, again, it's very aggressive. And you can almost pick up the tone of voice here. It says, "Keep my commandments and live." Now that's really interesting because he adds to it, he's not only authoritative here, he adds to what his commandments will do for his son and what his commandments will do for us. And as God speaks to our heart and commands us to obey him, here Solomon says, "Keep my commandments and live." So there's life in obeying. There's life in obedience. In doing what God tells us to do, there's a life. It says here the benefit of obedience is life. And so he said, "Keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye." Now again, there's something that I noticed as I was going through this. In the first part of his instruction to his son, he's making it a little bit more personal. He's not talking general, he's talking personal. And let me point that out to you. In verse number 1, he says, "Keep," in the word, "my words." And then in verse number 1, he says, "Lay up my commandments." So he's being very personal with his son here. And then verse number 2, it's "keep my commandments." And then also in verse number 2, "my law." And then he goes on again, giving a description, giving him an application to help him understand the importance of his law. And he says, keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye. And we've all probably heard that expression at one point or another. When we'll refer to someone, as the apple of our eye. I remember, telling my daughter when she was a little girl, she was the apple of my eye. And that's more of a term of affection. That's a term of endurance and and love and dedication towards someone. And so what he's getting at here, he said, okay, with my law, with those things that I've written for you, and again, he's saying here, my law. So exactly, what does he mean here, my law? What is a law? It's something that is written down by an authority, not for our pleasure of whether we want to or don't want to. It's something that we need to do. For example, when we get out on the highway and it says the speed limit is 65 miles an hour. That is a law. And I'll confess here, I have trouble with that. All right? But it's not a suggestion. Now, I've been in other countries, Tammy and I, in Mexico and Mongolia, in Armenia, in India, in those countries that we have visited. Traffic laws are merely a suggestion. They weren't meant to obey. Traffic light, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stop. They're just going to blow their horn and keep going, and you better get out of their way. But Solomon is not meaning that here. When he says law, he means something that he has laid down, and he expects it to be obeyed. Also, the attitude that he expects us to have, and again, that God expects us to have for his law, for his word, is as the apple of thine eye. It should be something that you look at that is important to you. It is something that you admire. It is something that you put into. And so then he gets a little bit more descriptive in verse number 3. He says, bind them upon thy fingers. Write them upon the table of thine heart. So again, he's wanting us to look at it and focus, and it be something that we love and respect. And then he says, bind them upon thy fingers. And as I got to thinking about that, when I was going over this again this morning, and I got to thinking about binding them on my fingers. And again, as you look at that, it refers to more of a commitment of doing something. For example, on my hand, I have a ring. That ring is a symbol of a binding contract with my wife. You see, because I have this ring, and I put it upon my finger, and it's bound upon my finger. I was going to say it'd take a lot to get it off, but it slides right off tonight. My hand's not small enough. But what it is it's a binding contract. And as I look, and as I go through life, because I have entered into this contract, I have an outward example of what my commitment is. And again, what he's saying here is bind them, his law, upon thy fingers. And basically, it's going to change the direction of your life. It is going to dictate what you do and what you don't do. And so what he's trying to get his son to realize here is it's very important. And then he goes on, he says, write them upon the tables, upon the table of thine heart. Now again, he's referred to the heart many times. And again, the reason for the heart is because as we've said before, when you get something in the heart, that means it gets done. Because it's in your mind does not necessarily mean it's a done deal, or you're going to accomplish that goal or finish that goal. But when it becomes something that is in your heart, it means basically, you're going to stop at nothing to get it done. And it says, so write them upon the table of thine heart. And then verse number 4, say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinsman. Now see, he's talking about in verse number 3 of what you do. And in verse number 4, he's talking about your relationship that you should have with wisdom. He says, say unto wisdom, thou art my sister. What he's referring to is, again, as we think, he's giving examples here as we think of relationships that we have here on earth. One of the closest relationships that I have is with my sisters, or my sister. Somebody that's close to me. It's someone that is in most cases is blood related, and generally, and should be very important, a very important person. And so, what is he saying about wisdom? And again, as we've read through the scriptures before, many times in the scriptures, in Proverbs here, he refers to wisdom as in a feminine sense, or as a she, or as her. And he's actually talking to wisdom. And so here he says, wisdom, thou art my sister. And again, he refers to another relationship. He says, call understanding thy kinsman. And again, he's being very personal here. He's showing and he's guiding us, on how we should see the commandments, how we should see the law, how we should have them in our heart, and what kind of relationship we should have with these things. Wisdom should be like my sister. And then call understanding thy kinswoman. Now again, a kinswoman, what that means is that is a female. That is a female relation. Someone that is related to you. And understanding, where does understanding fall in? Understanding falls in when we have knowledge. And then the wisdom comes in when we apply that knowledge correctly. Then we get understanding because we have applied the knowledge. We've applied the knowledge we wind up with understanding. And he said, okay. He said, so call understanding thy kinswoman, a female a relative. Verse number 5, he goes on. And I've kind of written little things here in my alongside my Bible here. In verse number 5, it says, "They that may keep thee, that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words." Okay, now in verse number 5, as he's done many times, he gives the reason why these things, why wisdom, why understanding, why his law should be in the places they are in your life. And so, again, it helps you to know who to avoid. Many times, or I should say all of the time, when the devil approaches us with something, it always seems gray. The devil presents very few things black and white. Because then you can identify it. Then you know, okay, hey, no, I'm not going to do that. He always presents it gray. And my dad always used to tell me, when something's gray, you probably ought to avoid it. He said, those gray areas of life, avoid it. because generally you're going to get yourself in trouble. So keeping understanding and keeping wisdom and keeping the law and keeping the commandment in their proper places in our life will help us. And it says it will keep us from the strange woman. Again, now remember, we're talking here, and the subject matter is about adultery. And the strange woman, or another way we could put this, or the harlot or the prostitute, the one who is coming with the intent to lead you astray. And so it says that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her lips. And again, he describes here, this is who she is, and this is how you stay away from her, and this is how she's going to speak to you. She's going to be very flattering. She's going to be very complimentary. She's going to tell you basically what it is you want to hear. It's kind of like going and buying a used car from a used car salesman. Of course, I hope we don't have any used car salesmen in here, but, used car salesmen and lawyers, they have a lot in common. and politicians. They really don't know how to tell the truth. And this strange woman, she's going to flatter you. She's going to tell you what she wants you to hear in order to get you to do what she wants you to do. And so what he's saying, son, he said to his son here, he said, be careful, watch out for these things. And then he gives. Then he goes on to give an observation. In verse number 6, he says, "For at the window of my house I look through my casement." So he talks about where he's at, and praise the Lord, he's in the safety of his house. He's looking through the window, so he's far away from what he is about ready to describe. And folks, in our lives, that's where we need to be. Far away from what he is about ready to describe. Again, and I see this over and over again, and I see it again in our church, and in churches across America. We're playing too close to the fence. We're playing too close to the flattering woman. We're playing too close to the strange woman, and we're hoping, or we take the attitude of, well, it may have happened to another person, but it's not going to happen to me. I can do this. I can be close enough to this, and it's not going to get me. And I'll tell you what, you're very deceived if that's the way you feel. And so he says, for at the window of my house, I look through my casement, and behold, among the simple ones, I discern among the youths, a young man void of understanding. Here, honestly, he describes most of us. All right? And he says here, I beheld among the simple ones, that group that don't have enough sense to get out of the ring. And again, that those people that I'm talking about, in those times in our life when we try to play too close to the edge. And so he said, among the simple ones, I discern among the youths a young man void of understanding. Again, another way to put that, for us to understand, is that young man that thinks, I've heard the commandment, I know the law, but it's just not going to happen to me. I'm smarter than that situation. Verse number 8, it goes on. It says, this simple one, this young man void of understanding, it says, he passes through the street near her corner, and went the way to her house. Now, who's he speaking to here? He's not speaking about wisdom. He's not speaking about understanding. He's speaking about the strange woman. He's speaking about the stranger that flatters with their lips. This simple one, or this man void of understanding, the Bible says, passes through the streets near her corner. Again, because he's convinced in his heart that, yeah, that happened to this person, but it's really not going to happen to me. I've got it under control. I can handle it. And so, the Bible says he passes near her corner. He gets close. You know, when the moth gets too close to the flame, what usually winds up happening? They get burned. And he went the way to her house. You know, a very simple way to kind of, you know, put this and to really kind of help us understand it. He went looking for trouble. You know, he was void of understanding. And he went somewhere where he knew that this strange woman was. You know the best way to avoid sin? Stay away from it. Stay away from it. You know, I learned a long time ago as a young man, and when I was struggling in different areas of my life, you know, I learned that there were some people that I just could not be friends with. I remember after I got saved at 15 years old, I had some friends of mine that every time that I got around them, it just seemed like I wound up in a bad place. It just seemed like I wound up doing the things that I knew that I shouldn't do, the things that I knew I was going to get in trouble over. But there was just something about it. You know, they didn't invite me, I just went. You know, I kind of like the simple one here. I went, I got close to the corner, and I went there, and I got caught. And mixed up in that situation. And then verse number 9, it gives the time and kind of paints a picture of the location of the strange woman and the one and the stranger that flatters with their lips. And again it says, in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. You know, it kind of gives us a sense of a secret kind of a place here. You know, and how many times have we gone to do something and we know that we probably shouldn't do it, and we kind of do this number. Nobody sees me. I'm here all alone. Nobody knows, and nobody's going to find out. You see, again, what Solomon is trying to relate to his son here is these deeds, when they take place, is in the twilight, in the evening, in the dark, and the dark night. And what he's telling his son, you know what the strange woman is going to tell you, and what the stranger that's going to flatter with his lips is going to tell you, that you won't get caught. Nobody will know. You're all by yourself. But we all know that that's not the devil's playbook, and that's not how it turns out. Verse number 10, and behold, there met him a woman with the attire of an harlot, and subtle of heart. You know, just kind of picture in your mind. And as I was sitting there studying this, and as I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about this simple one, and I was thinking about this simple man, and just kind of picture in your mind, okay, you know, this young man, you know, he's out in the street. He has went near the corner because he figured, well, hey, I'm not going to get caught. He passes by the way of her house. You know, he gets very close to where she's at because he knows where she lives. And he's there in the twilight and in the evening, in the dark night, You know, and again, you know, he's kind of checking things around. And when you go looking for trouble, trouble's looking for you. Already, trouble's looking for you. And see, this young man set out honestly looking for trouble. And trouble found him. While he was there, where no one, he thought it was a secret, no one could see, no one could look, what met him was a woman with the attire of a harlot. In a subtle heart, a subtle heart. He goes on to describe her further. She is loud and stubborn. Her feet abide not in her house. Now is she without, now in the street, and lieth wait in every corner. Look what happens here in verse number 13. So she caught him. You know why she caught him? He was in that secret place where he didn't think anybody was looking. He didn't think, you know, he really honestly felt like he was above falling. He was above getting caught. And it says, so she caught him and kissed him. And with an imprudent face said unto him, I have peace. I have peace offering with me. This day have I paid my vows. You know what she's saying? She caught him. She grabbed him. She gave him a big old kiss. You know what she was doing? She was giving him what he wanted. She was pulling him in the rest of the way. You know, I've used this phrase many times, and my dad's the one that shared it with me. You know, he told me, you know, when I began to date and different young ladies, and he said, son, he said, one of the things you do is, he said, you don't even want to start. He said, you don't even want to start with a kiss. He said, because the first kiss, he said, it's like Lay's potato chips. Not just one will do. And in my mind, when I was reading that, I was picturing that in my mind, in my dad saying that. And see, that's what was going on here. This young man went looking for trouble, and he found it. And again, he thought he was going to get by with it, and she caught him, and she kissed him, and with her imprudent face, said unto him, I have peace offering with me. You know what she said? It's okay. It's all right. It's not going to hurt you. You know, I have a peace offering. It's everything is going to work out fine. You know, she's telling him, I've got it all under control. This day have I paid my vows. You know, and what she was telling him, it's okay just this once. Just this once. It's okay. Therefore, verse number 15, therefore came I forth to meet thee, diligently to seek thy face, and I found thee. You know what she's telling him now? She said, I caught you. You know, I was already looking for you. I was already seeking you. I was seeking you diligently. You know, the world, you know, and sin spots very easily someone who's on the edge. Someone who's not really practicing discretion, and they're right there on the edge. And so sin sees that. And then she begins to describe how wonderful this situation is going to be in verse number 16. She says, I have decked my bed with covering of tapestry, with carved work and with fine linen of Egypt. You know, she was filling his head all full of how wonderful it's going to be. You know, how great this sin, you know, is going to make him, and how beautiful it looks. You know, the devil always makes sin look really good. You know, you can look at any alcohol commercial, cigarette commercial, bar, winery, and you see all these wonderful, successful people, you know, in fancy cars and wonderful, you know, suits and clothes, and you know, and they have it all together. You know what they don't show you? What they don't show you is that guy laying in the gutter. And in Mongolia, we saw this so much. And in the wintertime, many times men would die in the night because the weather was so cold. They would be out drinking, and they would be so drunk, and they would pass out on the ground, and in the middle of the night they would freeze to death. And what they don't show you, you know, when you go down to downtown Cincinnati, and you see those guys walking around down there, and you know, they urinated on themselves, and they smell, and they're living under cardboard. You know, the devil doesn't show you that, and the strange woman, she doesn't say that. You know, she lets you know that, hey, she's decked her bed, she's covered it with tapestry, she's got the finest linen of Egypt on there. And verse number 17, I have perfumed my bed with aloe and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us salsa ourselves with love. You know, again, she's selling something that she doesn't have to give. And then for the good man, now again, she's covering all the tracks here. She's covering all of the areas here. She says, for the good man is not at home. Don't worry, you're not going to get caught. He's gone on a long journey. He hath taken his bag of money with him, and will come home at some day, at the day appointed. With her much fair speaking, she caused him to yield. With the flattering of her lips, she forced him. You know the best way to stay out of this spot, folks, is to run as quick as you can the other way. Don't go looking for it. You know, again, in the whole context of what we're reading here, we're reading about his observation that he is seeing from his window about a simple man, or the simple ones that are in the street, and they're going close to where they shouldn't be. They're doing things they know they shouldn't do, and they're planning on never getting caught. And what happens? They got caught. Verse number 21, she persuades them with her fair speech. She causes them to yield with the flattering of her tongue. He goeth in verse number 22, he goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stock. I wrote down at the bottom of this verse, so stupid. So stupid. You know, here's this young fellow. He thinks he's got it all figured out. He thinks he's got it all hid. And her intentions all along is to lead him, the Bible says, straightway as an ox goeth to the slaughter. You know what she had planned for him all along? She's going to slaughter him. She's going to do him in. Or as a fool to the correction of the stock. In verse number 22 is the consequences of the actions. Verse number 23, it continues. till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasten to the snare, and knoweth not it is for his life. You know what I wrote under verse number 23? Too late. You reap what you sow. You see, verse number 23, it's all over. And so what is Solomon trying to get across to his son here? You want to avoid everything that was just described? Keep my words, lay up my commandment with thee, keep my commandments and live, keep my law as the apple of thine eye, bind them upon the fingers, bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the table of my heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman. Keep that they may keep thee from the strange woman and from the stranger that flattereth with her words. You want to avoid from verse 6 all the way to verse 23? Follow verse number 1 through 5. Simple. And again, and as I have learned in my own personal life, folks, this has happened. I would like to tell you it hasn't, but this has happened to me over and over and over and over again. When you play too close to the end, and you see, folks, that's one of the things that I'm really burdened about in America today. And I'm not talking about outside the door. What I'm talking about is inside the door of the church. What we're doing, we're leading our families. We're leading our children, and we're staying so close to the edge. And we're staying so close to the edge. And then what happens is when our children go astray, or when we fall, or when we get into trouble, we look and say, what happened? What happened? Solomon told his son, you want to avoid that? Stay away. Stay far away. Do whatever you need to do to be as far away from that as possible. Even if that means get new friends. Get new friends. You want to know how to get rid of a bad friend? Start witnessing to them, start telling them about Jesus, and start inviting them to church. They're either going to come and get saved, or they're going to say, see you later, I don't have time for that. And so that is the end of the lesson today. I pray that that was an encouragement to you. We have 2 more lessons, and we will be finished with the first 17 lessons that Solomon was giving his son in the first 9 chapters of Proverbs. And so what we normally do, those of you